you're gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Bienvenidos de nuevo a ti, a mí y al elefante. Welcome back to you, me, and the elephant. This is your host, Deb Air. Flying solo today, which I'm never really flying solo because y'all are with me. And I also know Crystal will be listening to this with just this beautiful anticipation. Which brings me to our question today, and that is, what are you expecting? This is certainly a conversation that I have explored internally and with others. And it's also a conversation that keeps evolving for me. So I figured, why not bring it to you all so that we can also dance in our expectations together. So I think how I'll play with this is sharing my own experiences with expectations. And I believe I'm always including the observation and experience of listening to people share about their lives and in relationship to expectations and possibly disappointments in life. And so there's lots of things to explore here. And what I'd like to go over today is, what are expectations? What are our expectations influenced by? What are they? What do they help us with? And how can they potentially confine us? And also, I want to invite into the conversation the idea of anticipation and how I feel that expectation and anticipation have some relativity, and yet there's some distinctions between them that I think are important. And that my goal is that riding this conversation with those two in tandem will allow a broader bandwidth of how you can experience your own expectations or what you may feel people expect of you, and give yourself some new strategies on how you can dance with expectation. And may it broaden your experience, and may it add some more mystery into your decisions, your experiences, and your everyday. So, expectation, if we were to just boil down the definition of expectation, it's a strong vision, it's a strong idea that something is going to happen right in the future. You're expecting something to happen, or it can be a strong thought or idea that someone is going to achieve, or you are going to achieve something. So it can be about some aspect of doing or performing, achieving something, doing something. And I think that everybody probably went, oh yeah, when I even introduced this topic and said, when people expect things of you. I think we can look at expectation in the ways of what we expect for ourselves internally, and sometimes that's known to us, and sometimes that can be more unconscious, yet we might be reacting or taking action from those more unconscious places. And I also think that there's the exploration of how we have external expectations applied to us. Again, I think some are obvious and some are less obvious. Let's start there. Expectations. We already know what they are. And I just want you to take a moment and close your eyes and take a couple slow breaths in your nose and out your mouth. And whatever comes up for you, think about a time when you felt like there were high expectations upon you. And I'm going to give you a moment to consider that. And if you are having a hard time tracking that, try to remember a time where you had high expectations for yourself. and just nod. I know that I'm not seeing you, but I will know if you're nodding when you have that moment, that memory. And I want you to check in with your body and try to go back there in time and remember how your body felt, what experiences, what thoughts, what emotions were you experiencing in your body? Did you feel tense? Did you feel open, excited? How did that feel to have a high expectations from somebody else, from the outside world, or for yourself? Okay. So noticing what that felt like. And how did that turn out with this particular example? Is it something that you actually achieved? Did you like cross the finish line of that expectation? And was it in the way that it was planned out, whether it was externally expected or internally expected? And this can go either way. So it could be a hell yes, it was. And it could be like, no, I fell short. Either way, I'm curious how you felt. And once you achieved that thing, or just the experience of not achieving that thing. I promise I won't leave you hanging in this. I think that the conversation itself is going to breed more space and even let you go back into this memory that you're starting with here today and potentially see it differently, potentially add some more perspective, maybe some more compassion, and some more awareness to that memory. So, expectation has this future component to it. And I have found that expectations are sneaky. They're very slippery because I think, in one way, when we are wanting to vision a life for ourselves and we want to put into action things that support our growth, that support our evolution, that support things that we want to create in the world, that expectation is part of that whole package. I think it can be a slippery slope on how we use it, because I feel that baked into expectation, there is a lot of cultural influence. That cultural influence could be how you grew up. What did your parents expect of you? Who did you have to be to receive love? And sometimes, depending on how you grew up, if it was a deep, loving family, or you felt like you were the black sheep, or you felt like you grew up in an abusive household, regardless, we all tend to become the thing that will give us the most connection, even if it wasn't deep love, some aspect of that. And that really does stem from expectation that the world outside of us, I said this on our creativity episode, that when we're up in the stars and we're all bees in a hive, we just go, oh my gosh, I know that this is why I want to come and incarnate. This is what I'm here for. And then we come into the world and we forget. We forget, what was that again that I wanted to be, that I wanted to do, how I wanted to create, how I wanted to contribute, how I wanted to embody this life. So it can be a tricky thing, because as soon as we come into the world, we have now this very external environment and petri dish that we're learning from every word, from every body language movement, from every sigh, from every anything, the food, the culture of ritual that you are immersed in absolutely influences what you expect. And so I believe that when we have that, we have this experience of what we are expected to be based on receiving love from our parents or our teachers, our environment in any way. And I think that those external expectations can bleed into our internal expectations. And I think somewhere in between that, we can lose the space of really finding the mystery, or swimming in the mystery of discovery, of rediscovering who we were in the stars before we came here, before we embodied into this moment, into this life. So it can become very narrowing, and how our neurology is designed and what it sees. I'm sure you've had this experience where you swear you saw something, or you swear somebody said something, or you swear you said something. And I think that, I forget the percentage, but there's such a high percentage of us that are living in reflex. We're living in past memory of what an experience was, so that we're less present with what it is. And this is for all of us. And this is the journey of our humanity. So it's not about, let me get to this point. We talk about presence all the time. And I think that practicing being in this moment is just the tool of learning how to discover or rediscover who you are. It's not something we get to and we're there 100%, because that's just really not how our brains work. I think that when we can broaden a conversation and see ourselves in every little piece of that conversation, then we become more inclusive, then we create more bandwidth so that we can explore more and that we can have different ways to become resourceful. And so, to go back to the expectation, we have this external expectation, whether it be our parents and just the culture we grew up in general. And there's many different ways in which that is imprinted on us. And those formative moments become imprinted and they become our own expectations. And I believe we all understand that we can have expectations that are way too freaking high. And maybe they're not even way too freaking high, but that all of our expectations don't belong to us. And what I would love to invite into this conversation is, how can we explore more of who you are based on broadening your understanding of expectations and knowing that you don't have to stop there. And so in comes anticipation, and we'll get back to expectation. I believe that anticipation is related to expectation, meaning that anticipation does have some expectancy to it, right? It does have this future, like, calling moment. Can you remember a moment when you were anticipating something? And usually anticipation has a connotation that you're excited about something, but it has you on an edge because there's still an uncertainty about it. And I think that's the difference between expectation and anticipation, is that expectation has a certainty to it. It is the way that it is. And even though it's future, you need to walk into that very concrete black and white vision. And I believe that anticipation has a little bit of unknownness to it. It is in the future, but there is this known, and then there's this mystery mixed in, because there's an anticipation that you don't know exactly what it's going to be like yet, but that you desire to know. I believe that the place where we probably feel that the most is when we're excited about something, probably when we're falling in love and we're dating somebody and we're anticipating seeing them again, because we know that we've already experienced a joy in that connection, but we're anticipating more. And that can be in any realm. Anticipation has this mystery baked in. And I think that living in a world that embodies or projects a lot of fear, I think that our relationship with anticipation can become diminished, because living in the mystery can become scary versus exciting. And I'm sure we've had both, right? Expectation, on the other hand, I think that can relate to more of a cultural influence. As we already mentioned, there's this cultural expectation. If you are a man, if you are a woman, if you are a this or if you are a that, there are certain etiquette ways of living which you are expected to uphold. I think that there's some value in that. And I also think that there's a lot of constriction that happens with that, that if we are not allowing anticipation to be part of our world, if we are not inviting in the mystery, which I think the mystery of anticipation is influenced by the spiritual realm. It's influenced by that spark of creatrix that we are beyond the mind, beyond the body, even that part that we are so much bigger than the I that we know, that the self that we know. And that's when we have access more to the quantum realm. We have access to the field that is bigger than ourselves, where expectation can also connect to the field, but more to the cultural field. What is the collective consciousness? What is the critical mass? Like what are you hearing every day? What are you seeing on social media? Those things influence how we expect things to be. If we see all of these picture perfect edited posts with couples and we see that this is what it looks like, it's supposed to look like some fairy tale, and we are in our relationship and we are experiencing something other than a fairy tale, we may want to leave that relationship. We may close down. We may think that we don't have an incredible foundation in this relationship because it is not what we have been indoctrinated to believe or expected to believe what a great relationship looks like, or a great career looks like, or a great community looks like. If we are just looking at what is being told, we're going to see a limited view because we are living in this culture that is either very expanded in its fear, and that's what we're getting all the time. We're fearful of what is to come. And it's not about being blind to that, but it's also how can we invite in more space? How can we invite in the expectancy of mystery? And that's where when we can add anticipation. Just think about when you were a child and you couldn't really sleep that night before the first day of school because you were so excited. At least in my generation, we didn't have internet. We didn't have, we had the phones that had the long cords, and if we were lucky, we could pull the phone receiver into a separate room and have privacy. But other than that, unless our friends lived down the street and we could ride our bikes to each other, we didn't see a lot of our friends for the whole summer. So we had this anticipation, kind of nervous, excited, this whole new mystery that we were going to walk into. And I think that if we could invite more mystery into our everydays, and that inviting anticipation into our expectations can really expand what we're capable of actually achieving. Because when we're expecting based on the cultural field alone, and if some of our most potent selves is not included in that story, and that your unique thread of being you don't see that, then you may be missing out in the biggest mystery of rediscovering who you are and things that you love that you don't even know that you love. So, how do we do that? How do we add in the mystery? How do we become more anticipatory while, funny enough, practicing who we are right now? I used to do this in my relationship years ago. I would want my partner to know what I was thinking, and I would want him to just figure it out. And I realized years later that part of what I was doing and projecting onto him was a feeling of not knowing what I wanted and the pain of not knowing what I truly wanted, and hoping and projecting that my partner would know, because that way I would find out a little bit more and discover more of who I was. And anyone who's ever done that knows that it doesn't usually work out that well, because the truth is the knowing, the deep desiring, the anticipation is something that no one can figure out for you. People can invoke certain energies in you, but I think that often there's such a gap in our culture of really having the space of the mystery of exploring what it is we truly want, and knowing that what we want is okay, and that we are enough to want what we want, and to be able to have the bravery and sacred container to speak to what we want. And the more that we have our exploration of mystery, and the more that we can practice coming into a present moment where we can feel the truth of our experience, of our feeling, of our sensations, I think that becomes the doorway to expanding what we expect from ourselves or what we expect from others. And can we expect a mystery? Can we expect a deepening within our expectations? Can we allow that to be the doorway into deeper connection with ourselves and others? So, one of the things that I have done when I feel like I have projected expectations, because there's always that judge in there that we are expecting things. I was just listening to a friend share, she was teaching her first yoga class, and her reporting of it was all the things initially were all the things that she could do better, and that, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have done this. And God bless her, because after that, she was like, listen, I want to actually brag about all these things and what even got me here and what I did amazing. And I think a few episodes back, I talked about writing a badass list, which is a beautiful idea if you haven't done it yet. So I'm recently rereading The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Most of you have probably read this already. For some reason, if you haven't, it's a great staple and has some really beautiful, timeless wisdom in it. I'm rereading it in Spanish, which I really love because that is its original text and language. And it's really beautiful to revisit things that you've already read, that you've already utilized in your life, and to come back to it all these years later has been really delicious for me. So, how does this relate? Here's the big thing I haven't mentioned yet. With expectations, especially when we have, I'm just going to use the word unrealistic expectations upon ourselves and others, what will always lead to is an aspect of disappointment. We often like to avoid disappointment, yet we have these expectations that I believe in their origin begin from this external cultural imprint that starts right when we come into the world and all the influences. So I believe it's our job to be able to bring in the mystery so that we can not so much avoid disappointment, but that we can become more aware along the way before we expect, because expectations can be very valuable. I think they're a bridge to our goals. Many times our goals, similar to expectations, can be limited to what the cultural expectations of us are. And so a lot of times our goals aren't always our own goals, and yet we feel disappointed when we don't reach them. I believe that sometimes we're not reaching them because they're not the truth, which goes back to that, how can I connect with what is true in me? Which I think that when we can start practicing what I call the sacred art of desiring, desiring isn't something that gets satiated. Rather, it is something that opens up the longing. It's the gateway to our soul. It's bringing back the mystery. It's bringing back the memory. Every time I desire, I know that my soul is coming through that desire. And it's less about it being accomplished like a goal and more that it's waking up the mysteries in myself that I have yet to explore. And that is what invites the anticipation. That's what invites the mystery. That's what illuminates the things that are less known by the mind and the culture and more known by the truth of who you are beyond the culture. So, expectations, beautiful, related to goals. But when our goals are born from our deepest desires, which create our values, then we start to have these expectations that don't create disappointment. When I moved here, I've shared the story before, I was going to buy a completely different business. And when I walked into that business, it was a big fat no. And I was disappointed Absolutely. But that disappointment didn't have a period on it. That disappointment opened up a doorway because my soul brought me to the East Coast. So I knew that the disappointment was just a bumper, and the bumper brought me to where I am today and brought me into so many different learnings that I never would have been exposed to. So, can disappointment just be the gateway? And I think that when our expectations become more soul infused and add in anticipation, and your desires are informing your goals, then we start having just a bigger realm of canvas to play from. To go back to the four agreements, one of the things that I do when I feel like I'm getting a little bit caught on that expectant wheel, and really it's a closed circuit. It's like expect too much, get disappointed, expect too much, and then I'm going to keep expecting. And what really it's doing is reinforcing that you're not enough. And then what I think it eventually does is your expectancy has a less girth in it, because you're going to expect it, but you're already going to anticipate that you're going to be disappointed. As said before, this can be a slippery slope. So, going back to the four agreements, the first agreement, as most of you probably remember, is be impeccable with your word. And I have to tell you, when I first read this years ago, I felt the truth in it, and I weirdly didn't love it. And I'm really just processing this with you right now. There was this part of when someone would say, like, say what you mean what you say, it would often have a little bit of a charge to it. And I think that what I felt personally, that because I didn't always know what I wanted to say, because I didn't always know what was brewing, and that being impeccable with my word didn't include not knowing, then I felt the pressure of trying to say something well, even if it wasn't completely my truth. So I'm going to say that again, because I don't know if that makes sense. I didn't feel a lot of space when it said be impeccable with your word. I interpreted that based on how I was raised, like, say something good, make sense of it, even if it's not completely what you feel, because you're not really sure what you feel yet, but you better say something. And I think that can be challenged sometimes, because we feel like the expectation is that we should say something. And I think that the mystery is part of our not knowing. I think not knowing can give the space. If we're expected to always have this answer to something, then where is the room for the mystery to come in? All these years later, what helps me with expectations when I feel that loop happening is when I say be impeccable with my word, what I'm saying to myself is be honest with what the truth is for you in a moment, and speak from that place, even if it's, I don't know, or wow, I'm feeling conflicted. Like, that is the impeccability, right? The impeccability, if that is truly a word, is the congruence of being honest with what you feel. And it's not so much about having a resolution to something as much as being able to extract the truth of a moment and knowing that that's okay, even if what you're feeling is that you don't feel okay. So that's number one. How does that help me? It allows me to loosen the grip of expecting myself to have some kind of answer, because I'm a boss, that I have to know everything, that I'm never going to make a mistake. Let's say there's an expectancy, as a leader, that I have to have the right answers, and like I said, a lot of those external expectations become our own internal expectations. So watch that. Allow being impeccable with your word to be an opportunity to connect with what feels true in a moment, no matter what it is. Number 2 of the 4 agreements is don't take anything personally. Now, this one can be sometimes difficult. And it's interesting because I think that We could go a lot of places with this, but I'm going to keep this simple. When you're not taking something personally, it's opening the scope to remember that there's always other information that, whether it's deep down inside of you that you're less aware of, or there's always something else in information that you're not aware of that the other person is responding from. And when you can add that into the picture, it allows me to be able to take what is happening and the experience, whether it feels like a failure, whether it feels like a judgment from somebody else, and just really notice what comes up in me. And if I have a charge, what's behind that? Can I sit with it long enough to feel? I think that when we get very high expectations, there are tender spots within ourselves that haven't been addressed, that haven't been sat with, that haven't had the floor, the time, the stage. When we cannot take it personally, it's funny because it actually becomes a gateway into becoming more personal with myself. Instead of me having to defend some sense of self because I think what they said is all about me, it never is, no matter what we're saying. And I think that is also why having sacred agreements and having containers within, it's not going to happen every day, but if you live from sacred agreements within yourself, that is going to influence how you respond in different moments. And also if you have relationships that within the container of that relationship, you have certain tenets or sacred agreements, it's really helpful because you won't have as much of those knee-jerk responses like, why did they say that to me? Wow, this is what it triggers in me. And I think that we can become triggered more when we're taking it personally versus like, wow, this brings something up in me. This evokes something up in me. And so that's how not taking it personally is helpful for me when I'm feeling the expectation or hope that somebody was going to either act a certain way or say a certain thing differently than I expected. But when I don't take it personally, I can just see more. I can consider more, and I can just take the moment for what it is, and I can allow it to bring me into a deeper space within myself. And the third agreement is not to assume. How many times do we assume? And we already know that can make an ass out of you and me. Yes, I said the cheesy line. And it holds truth in it. Assumptions come from the expectations. Assumptions come from already knowing the outcome. And I think the tricky part is when we are in, especially in our, let's say our children, if you're a parent, or our long-term relationships, family, friends, that we have certain patterns of relating within that container of relationship. And what happens is when we don't allow for the mystery and we don't allow for the anticipation of things, we will have patterns of expectation. And so we may go, I already know what they're going to say. I already know what they're going to do, or they'll never do that because they never do. Even if you're right, even if that thing that you absolutely know that they're going to say or they're going to do comes true, how much have you contributed to that coming true? Are you able to see something novel, the anticipation, the mystery of life? Are you able to be a beacon, mirror for somebody in your life that allows you to be surprised by them? When we are assuming, we're not in the present moment. And again, this is why these 4 agreements help me go into a container that says, here I am right now. What is true in the moment? How can I be impeccable with my word? Meaning, how can I be true to what is happening in this moment the best I know? And whatever the words that come out are congruent. The second is don't take anything personally. I think the other part of not taking it personally is we walk in a bigger circle. It's more than just about us or the ego self or the identity that's having a reaction. And until we can walk onto a bigger stage of awareness, considering everything that's going into that moment, then can we actually come to a different awareness, a different resolution, or solution to something that's happening? Or even can we connect with something that's actually tender, that in fact, whatever this person or this occasion evoked in you actually brought you closer to it for healing? And the assumption, it's a very powerful thing to be able to say, what if I wasn't assuming? What if I didn't know the outcome? What if there was something mysterious about to happen? What if I could get curious? And I think that's what not assuming something helps you gain access to. And then the fourth one is do your best. And for me, do your best just means do your best at the first three I just mentioned. I think we already have such a performance pressure in our culture that doing the best is allowing yourself to take the time to go through the other three agreements and be able to be human is really what I wish it said. Do your best at being human. That means do your best at being perfectly imperfect and imperfectly perfect. And just those agreements applied to the understanding of where expectations may come, how the external influence of the culture and the culture we grew up in become our internal embedded expectations, and how we can use anticipation to invite back the mystery and the space into what is possible, which then can actually amplify and illuminate our expectations in a whole other sort of holistic, soul-derived way. I hope that you enjoyed this delve into expectations and review of the four agreements and how I personally use them in a way that can bring me back into the mystery, bring me back into expecting new things and expecting the unexpected. As always, I'm immensely grateful. Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.